Äshèyi, Äshèyi tsandadal, Dananuchindu, Agaslan, Agasanache, So Sandakanu Tache. We are your relatives. We are very happy to come and visit you and spend some time with you.
Archaeological finds show that people have been living in the Äshèyi area for at least 8,000 years. Remains of the camps of the ancestors have been found throughout the region, with the most abundant signs being in 3 general areas: the north end of the Big Lake around the bay and the village, the area around the south end of the Big Lake and the north end of Canyon Lake, where the village known as Äshèyi, Fishnet Place, is located, and Lin, Canyon area, where the Aishihik and Desdiash rivers join, which continues to be home for many Champagne and Aishihik people.
Äshèyi means at the end of the mountain or end of the mountain tail, whatever, that like the mountain range.
Yes.
And it runs all the way down from Canyon to Äshèyi, all the way down, and then it comes down at the end. So that's the end of the mountain range.
Our homeland and our settlements are all places of power, where we obtain country foods that feed us, but also where we connect to our history and those who have walked this land before us. Making such connections is difficult in some parts of the Äshèyi area. For example, in the Äshèyi settlement, all but one of the cabins has been washed into the lake as a result of the changing lake levels. Still, around each of the 3 traditional settlements, you can see the places where our people were laid to rest. An important Indian doctor was buried near Äshèyi village. People came from across southern Yukon to be healed by this powerful lady. Munchlalata, a meadow area in the Aishihik River Valley bottom, is another important place. Once a favored place for trapping gophers, the Munchlalata meadow has been destroyed by excessive water flow. It is now too dangerous to cross the river, so people can no longer access what was once an important hunting area to the west.
Water is really important to us, not only too important for our survival, we also use it in ceremony. Our old people always had water beside their bed. Water has a spirit. It's very powerful.
They come from all over. They come from Champagne, they come from Carmacks, they come from a lot of them, most of Selkirk. Äshèyi was a good trading place. They come for fish, because we have a nice big lake full of fish, trout, and lingcod, and grayling, and jackfish, whitefish.
It was really good living. I remember all Isaac's, my grandpa, Charlie Isaac was from there too, Jenny and Jimmy Joe. I even remember Helen Stiff. I used to stay with her. And Charlie Stephen, all of them. And they really enjoy living, traditional way.
Before the airport closed, everybody stayed here year-round. I mean, this was a permanent village, eh?
Where the village is situated, they had an abundance of fish stock, whitefish and lake trout mainly, and in the area too, there's always been a herd of caribou. In the earlier days, it was along the migration route of the caribou, and my mom tells me stories about when she's seen campfires all around that lake, and in the winter when the caribou would move down.
And the reason that the village is over here is that the fish spawn here. And over here, under the cross, the trout spawn there. The whitefish spawn September and in the fall, So this is where the trout spawn. Whitefish spawn in the bay right here, just around the village, at 60 Mile too. World War II brought major change to Äshèyi. They built the road north through from the Alaska Highway, and the airport was established close to Äshèyi village. As outsiders moved into Äshèyi, our country, they began to recognize its worth and impose their values in saying how our country should be used, including who could use it. By the 1950s, the newcomer government was claiming that Otter Falls was reserved for crown fishing, meaning only royalty and officers of the military could fish here. A sign indicating this, and of fines for violation, once stood by the falls.
In the 60s, in the late 60s anyways, the authorities came and they told the people at the village there to gather. So they all gathered at the far end of the village there, and they told them that they had to move out of there. They're gonna shut the airport down, and they're not gonna have any more, no access to doctors, nurses. RCMP can't control, but they kind of scared the elders, saying that, you know, if somebody gets sick here, we can't save them. We're not going to be able to help you, so you have to move out.
In 1960, the airport was closed and many families were moved out to Haines Junction. DIA moved people out so that they could administer their programs and services to a group of people that was centralized in Haines Junction. Outsiders arrived to assess the lake and the river at Äshèyi. They needed a hydroelectric dam to power new developments in the Yukon, including the Faro mine. In 1972, the first water board hearing was held with the dam proponents, the Northern Canadian Power Commission. There was very limited representation of Dun, the people who had lived there for countless generations.
They brought Chief Albert Isaac into the water board hearings. He was a 90-year-old Southern Shoshone man that spoke his native language, and he was participated in the water board hearings. In my view, if there's ever a time that the federal government should have lived up to their duty, to their fiduciary duty, that was it. And they didn't. They failed.
This project here that you're talking about, not one has asked any of the Indian people here would they like it in their native tongue. We have interpreters here that the chairman could have called upon and asked them whether they like to see this project go through or not.
Thank you very much, Chief Elijah Smith. We have a record of your speech, and it'll be document number 7 in this record. Thank you.
Thank you.
The project was a project that involved Native people for the first time. It's a real hard feeling to go and present something because I felt I was all alone, and because of that, because there was Northern Development, all the businesses along the highway and all the businesses in Haines Junction and in Whitehorse were for the project because of cheaper power.
Do the Northern Canada Power Commission have any questions of Mr. Ray Jackson?
Yes, I'd like one question, please, Chairman. Chief Jackson, you mentioned in closing that your band was not in full agreement with the project and therefore would not endorse it at this time.
We're in the process of researching these different items, and our research into land claims, and so we are going to withdraw. Not going to go in detail on that because we just have to go and answer these questions as we come up with them, as we research them out.
We were all living in Aishihik when they first brought in the engineers. They came with a helicopter and they landed in front of our house. And these engineers needed somewhere to stay, and we put them up in old Albert Isaac house. And we didn't know what they were doing. They just told us that they were surveying around the land and around the lake. In the 1970s, there was seasonal and periodic use of Aishihik continued by the families that still had their belongings there. Aishihik wasn't abandoned as the non-native people assumed it was. People continued to trap, to fish, to check on their cabins and their belongings. People raided the cabins when the families moved out, and that's why the village seemed to be empty prior to the building of the dam.
Your friends' fears are groundless. I can assure you that we will not be allowed to flood that village. First of all, let me tell you that there's nobody actually living there. Nobody at all. There may be about a dozen cabins, and a few people go out there in the summer to fish.
The Aishihik Generating Station began operating in 1975. The same concerns raised in the 1970s were raised again in 2002 during the first license renewal and raised again today as Yukon Energy seeks a new long-term license for the facility.
45 years ago, Chiefs Elijah Smith, Albert Isaac, and Ray Jackson participated in the first ever water board hearing in the Yukon, and it was for this facility. Today we are still here and still engaged in this process for a better outcome for our people. We want to do what is best for our community and the environment for the long term. Today, the direct descendants of the leaders who represented us 45 years ago again stand before you and on behalf of our nation. We are still here to be cooperative. Even though we have not been treated fairly in the past, we are still here. 1993 and 2020 are very different times for all Aboriginal peoples of this country. Through the exploration of the last 27 years, our Aboriginal rights and titles have changed substantially. The existence of YAC's encumbering right does not erode CAFN's status as a self-governing First Nation. We need to work with YAC, which is the ultimate goal.
It's like Chief Smith said in his statement, we've carried this cost on our back for over 40 years so that all of the Yukoners can live in a good life, so that they can be warm, so they can have light.
The story of the Aishihik Dam is one of hardship and past wrongs. We have been impacted by the production of affordable power for Yukoners and industry for more than 40 years. And the costs to our people, land, and waters have been high. We believe recognition of our rights and the value of our relationship to the land are essential. Like all Yukoners, Champagne and Aishihik First Nations want responsible and clean energy. We want to be a part of the solution. Today, the Yukon has an opportunity to do better. We have an opportunity now to reconcile past wrongs by working together. De ana ke ko da chinaye e da che yatsu wa klina o atsa mai ko san de ana ke ko da chinaye e da che de ana ke ko da chi